強大すぎる。俺のパワーを封印する役目を持つ鎧が今砕かれた。
そうか。
Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new video. This video we're going to be going over the Giga Gladiator, or in this case the Valdo Gladiator, and why I chose this to be my endgame build for the league, and what I wanted to basically pursue and put all of my currency into, because I like doing that, and like min-maxing out a build, and we are overall pretty min-maxed on this character. It could definitely get better, for sure, in terms of mirroring pieces of gear directly. This goes for cluster jewels and for gear pieces, but this is close enough though in terms of performance of where I want it to be. If I were to mirror pieces of gear, it really wouldn't change too much on the character besides a bigger number, which is great and all, but it's reached that breakpoint of its power being able to do whatever it needs to do, which is everything. So we're going to go ahead and kind of talk about it, which is a lot to go over. I will be going over the POE separately, and I will leave a link to all of the Uber fights in the description as well to see how those fights would play out on a character like this. But it's definitely kind of a wild trip to play this character after playing my Trickster last season, which I posted a video on that, and the difference between the two. So the difference between this character and my Trickster last league is, one is the investment, so this character definitely has less investment than my Trickster last league, which was much more in terms of the mirror cost. This is definitely in the multi-mirror category for sure, but it is still definitely less than that. Additionally, the things like the clear has been toned down quite a bit because this is a Molten Strike character, so the clear is not as great as like a Kinetic Blast character. But the single target is very, very strong, and more importantly, the tankiness is not even close compared to the Trickster. Even compared to the pre-nerf Trickster stuff, it's still not even close. And like suppression nerfs and all that, the Gladiator shell just has way more in terms of survivability, and that's not just from stacking more energy shield, it's just from the block and the recovery through regen as such is a lot better, and the flexibility as well, being able to repath if you want on the tree to get things like leech is really, really potent for sure on the in terms of the types of content you want to fight. It isn't ailment immune, but it doesn't need to be. It's immune to the main ailments that it would need to be immune to, which is things like shock. Ignite is something it's not immune to, but it has, I think it's around like 46% reduction, something like that on ignite duration. And if you really need to, you can take Aberrath for less ignite duration. Now that doesn't make you immune because they're separate layers, but it gets you close enough. The thing is, you don't ever die to ignite except for one specific purpose, which is tanking the memory, the Uber Maven memory game, while you are regeneration disabled. That is the only time it is basically possible to die on this, because otherwise you can tank everything else. Now, what I will show is dying to the Brain Blast from Maven. This is without the Immortal Call, this being on a castle damage taken setup, which I usually leave it on. The only time you would need to change that is if you were tanking this specific ability, and you would then take it off that and you would push it manually. That's the only time. And it's no problem at that point. Besides that, nothing else matters. All of the other Ubers, though, are basically a joke. In the incarnations, you don't even take damage. I mean, you just walk up to them and you just kill them with a shell like this. Having 90 all res is fantastic, but again, all the other defensive layers on top of that are just so insane. I mean, you can just tank so many things, including degens as well. That's something that's really big, is a lot of characters will have a lot of max hit or a lot of recovery in terms of multi-hit mitigation, right? And then they can heal back up. This can just stand there. It doesn't need to leech or anything. It just can tank it. It can't sit in the middle of a Zero Storm, granted, but it can jump through it. And that's actually pretty efficient, saves you some extra seconds when farming the boss. So you actually just jump through the storm in order to get to the boss quicker. And especially when resummoning through his phases, you just run into the storm and you are able to resummon him, which is super important. So overall, a fantastic bosser for that metric. Now, in terms of T-17s, it's still very, very good at doing them. It's just not wiping the screen or anything, right? It has decent enough clear, but again, the main thing is the tankiness, and you can really be very aggressive on the mod choice. Like, you would think that things that have, like, less defense or minus max res or, you know, less suppression would really kill the build, or minus block, right? Having this be heavy block on this. It doesn't matter. Even with all the minus defense nerfs, you're still overkilling T-17s by so much, it doesn't even matter. Because, again, your gear is just through the roof, so your damage is still insane. And your tank is still enough as well, like nothing's going to kill you. So it feels absolutely fantastic for that. And yeah, overall it's just an all-rounder. So yeah, again, all the Uber fights will be in the description. I didn't have any T-17 like mapping footage, but it's just, again, it's nothing too special in the fact that it doesn't die, right, and it clears okay. But you can imagine, again, like it doesn't matter, right? You just roll in and kill everything. But I will now go over the POB because there are a lot of important things here which are pretty relevant, I think, to a lot of builds. Now, you may say, oh, well, I don't have like a huge budget to put this together, and that's fine. It's more about the important principles of what makes this character immortal, because you can take bits and pieces of this and put that into your own character potentially in the future or this league. And you can also build this character for sure on a, in quote, budget. You don't have to put in as much as I did to get it working. So there's definitely a lot of angles there for learning, and that's what I want the video to be about. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into the POB and break it down so that way we can get tankier and do more content. All right, we're gonna begin the POB now. So once again, take away what you can. If you have the budget to build this out, awesome. If you don't, also not a problem as well. Take what you can in terms of defensive principles out of this, much more than the offensive, because you may be able to apply some of this into your own builds. So that's what we're here for, is just for learning. So first thing I want to talk about is the damage. This is the only part which is kind of cooked. The damage looks really good, and it is higher than what it says here. It's not 12 million, it's got to be higher. Even with Nimbus, because it's not calculating that, if I were to multiply that just by a normal 2, saying 24 million, it's higher than that. So that doesn't make any sense. Now I am using the graft, allowing my damage to be lucky. So that would bring me up to 32 million. I still don't think that's the case. It seems higher. That's just my thoughts. Again, the enemy size preset's on medium. So, you know, that's for like Shaper, things like that, Maven, all that. But it seems a little higher than that. However, I'm not quite sure though if it's 109 million either. And especially with Lucky on, that seems a little weird. I see a lot of POBs taking this number, and how I got to this number is just taking the balls that you have, the projectile count, so I have 9, and then just multiplying by that. I don't think that's quite it either, but I just want to address that in case people are like, hey, you're calculating way too much damage. I agree. I think it's somewhere in the middle, but it's Molten Strike. It's a little bit variable. You kind of have to do your best to just, you know, feel it out. But let it be known though, in my opinion, I think the damage is absolutely fine, because you're killing Ubers still pretty quickly. And if you sit and cook on them, with the Gladiator Ascendancy, with War of Attrition, you're going to crank a lot farther. And this is just with 10 seconds, which is completely reasonable. I've had these fights go. I think that's completely fine. So anyway, DPS calculations, do what you will. The main thing is the tank, which now we get to get into the fun part of the POB, is all the tank stuff. So you'll notice all these huge max hits and all that stuff, right? And this is with our Immortal Call turned off. If we check it on, it goes even higher, which is absolutely crazy, to 1.3 million. Now granted, this is taking like a Guardian Pinnacle attack or something, right? Which again, at this point, you're immortal, it doesn't matter. But again, if you switch this to like, I don't know, like an Aziri Flame Blast or something, you know, it goes a lot lower for the max hit, etc. I say like, oh, it's like 100% roll range. And for some reason, it's not changing, but anyways, point is, it's tanky enough to tank whatever. What's important here is not necessarily the max hits, even though it is, but the recovery, and that's what makes this thing such a joy to play. So, let's start at the beginning, shall we? Gladiator. Why Gladiator? This Ascendancy has so much defense, it's insane. For basically your first 2 labs, you get Determined Survivor, which is setting your shield equal to 50% block chance. This means that you don't need to put block on your shield, right? So if you don't have any increased chance to block, so in this case it's 25%, it doesn't matter, it overrides to 50, which is incredible, right? So you can spec all the other stats that you actually want on it. But the star of the show is more than skill. This having block, attack, or spell damage is lucky if you block recently is absolutely insane. For reference, when I turn this off, we go down to, you know, pretty normal block chances, right? Still insane, but it's not lucky block, right? Going up to 93 and 92%, which is wild. Proccing this as well is very easy because, again, once again, it's a 1 in 4 to proc this. And then once it does proc, it can just keep reprocking on itself and refreshing. So it's very, very easy to keep up. The recovery on the shield with this then becomes insane because we have a massive hit pool, right, of ES. You're recovering percent ES. That ES ends up being, let's see here on the block, 1600 ES. And so you basically just become immortal off that alone from these two nodes. Then, in terms of bossing, War of Attrition is fantastic. You know, for things like mapping, right, where you're just blowing through, may not be as great, right? Like, you get a little bit of value out of this, but not much. When you're uber bossing, though, fantastic node. So that's what I'm using it for. I also do Valdo maps as well. So you just sit there on the boss, you get, you know, up to double damage. It's insane. So really, really good stuff. Super happy about that. Now, for the final ascendancy, usually these aren't too great in terms of what I'm going for, right? They don't really have much in terms of what they can offer. Like, I could say get a little bit of like explode or something and I get bleed. Anyway, it's really whack. We're not doing that. What we're end up doing here is taking otherworldly appendages. And this is for less damage taken. This is similar to Indomitable Resolve, but with no downside. Now, I would rather have Indomitable Resolve, but I can't do that because I'm a gladiator. But the fact that I take less damage is insane because it works on dots. I can hot swap my graphs if I want, which that's something to mention too. All of the Uber fights were done on these graphs, on Lightning and Cold. This means on Exarch, I was using Lightning and Cold, so this ascendancy point did nothing. If I had a Zothcraft, I'd be even tankier. So even tanking Incineration would be even easier, which is where he does his big nuclear effect, you know, in the middle of the arena, right? His hardest hitting ability. It would be totally, you know, even easier, right? Having a Zothcraft. So that's where we get all of our tank from. Let's keep going though. So now we have Insane Block, right? Which, pop that back on. Insane Recovery. Less damage taken here. But what else though? It can't just be that, right? 90% of all resistances. This is done through our Melding of the Flesh. You know, nothing too uncommon here. Melding, stacking max lightning resistance on our flask, on our chest, and on our helmet. And then we get an extra 1% as well, not here, on a natural calm. And then we also get it on our rare jewels. Coming in here for max lightning. Gets us 90% resistance across the board. In terms of hard-hitting abilities, this is useful, but it's much more important for dots, because this means any elemental dots become significantly less important. It means that your ES regen goes a much farther away, so you end up just not taking like any damage essentially from dots, which is great, except like the super hard-hitting stuff like a Cirrus Storm, but that's mainly Fizz, or at least has a big chunk of that, and that's your weakest mitigation in this build. But again, the hardest hitting things like an Uber Shaper Slam, it doesn't matter, like you're still gonna tank it anyway, so it doesn't really you know, change the build much, which is nice. So we have all that. What else do we have? Well, we have 100% spell suppression chance, so 40% reduction in terms of the damage that we are taking from spells right on the hits, which is also very, very nice. Okay, that's nice. What else do we have? We have Fortify. Fortify, we end up getting from our double corrupted Ephemeral Edge, which is fantastic. Now, this is a really expensive sword. If you wanted to do this otherwise, what you would probably end up doing is you would take out your Emperor's Wit in this case, and your Emperor's Mastery. These are just additional energy shield multipliers. And I would change these out for the Forbidden Flesh and Flame combo of Fortitude, having permanent Fortify right on the champion, which would be fantastic. So that's 20% reduced damage taken there, which is really, really nice. And also, too, there's just a good amount of combos here. Like if you want to go like Bane of Legends or something, but wanted to get more int, I think that's, you know, decently solid there, which is pretty good. Something to note on too, for our suppression, we do get that by getting tattoos on the tree as well as gear and mage bane, because we are super starved on that, which is very, very important. Now, on top of all this, a couple other things. Ailments. Let's talk about that real quick. I did mention that Ignite we are not immune to, but if we take a look here, Ignite duration, 41%. Overall, pretty good. You know, this is good enough for me. I'll go over Runegraph to the Warp in a second, but, you know, It doesn't last too long. Some of this other stuff too doesn't even matter because again, it can't kill you. There's our other avoidance, shock avoid, and freeze avoid, and chill avoid, which is super important. And we are stun immune as well. We are completely stun immune from Flask, so a lot of the important stuff. Runegraph to the Warp. This is really, really good. This works on things like Fortify, so your Fortify lasts 30% longer than any debuffs, things from like Maven, like Syrian XR Greats, all that stuff lasts 30%. It goes 30% faster on you, which is insane. Super cheap as well. Like, so this is something to take away here. This is a really cheap Runegraph. If you ever see cheap, just chuck it on your build. It's 1 point. It's really nice for mapping. It's really nice for bossing. It's just very, very strong. So that's going all over the defensive stuff. Now, could you make it tankier? Yes, you could. So in cases where you can't regenerate your ES, right, which could be during the middle of combat, you want a bit more recovery, you could go Ghost Reaver. You could go Ghost Reaver, and you could use a Vitality Leech's Life Watcher's Eye, and that would convert it over to ES with Ghost Reaver. In this case, our Watcher's Eye is using the block, and then extra mana's Energy Shield, but the Purity of Ice mod is dead, so you could use a Vitality mod here. We do run Vitality, it's set up just for that, which would be really, really nice. So that's totally an option. But once again, you don't really need it again. I think the only time you would is in an extremely rippy Valdo map, is where you'd want that recovery, right? Where you're not really recharging Energy Shield, you would just want more leech out of that, which would be absolutely fantastic. When you're doing Ubers, though, again, this is so overkill, it doesn't even matter. You just, if anything, the recharge is actually better, because things like Cirrus, right, where he's just bombing you from overhead, you can just recharge your Energy Shield and it doesn't matter. And this is meaning because you can't hit him most of the time. So that's really, really important. So these are overall tank layers. Big, huge hit pool through our in-stacking and big ES gear. Big block, big suppression, big resistance. Big regen as well, percent sources. So we have Zealot's Oath here, applying that regen. If we go into our calcs, let's go over our recovery. It actually should show, let's see here it is in our life because we're converting it. This is from our flask. This is from Tukohama, which is actually pretty solid. We're getting percent from our graphs. We are getting also some from our boots as well. This is having endurance charges, something we get when we block as well, having even more reduced damage taken. Forgot to mention that. And we have our vitality as well, adding just a little bit extra. It's puny though. It's only 10 flat. It's not a percent, but it's cute and it's there. So we got to mention it. Anyways, so that's in terms of our damage, our regeneration. Gems, nothing too crazy here to really touch home on. Should mention Flesh and Stone, that's in Sand Stance for also reduced damage taken as well when something's nearby and you're always on top of something. And Arctic Armor as well, standing still, which you're generally doing, taking less physical and less fire, which is absolutely fantastic. And getting a chill on the enemy, which is quite good, because that means they're attacking you less often. So all of this together creates an extremely tanky setup, and something that definitely people can strive for to create or make. I wouldn't say this is necessarily like an original setup or anything, because it's like, oh, you're using Ephemeral Edge, we're stacking big Energy Shield. Nothing too, crazy there. But I think the tank principles are really, really important, because taking portions of this into your character, may it not be a Valdo character, but even just a mapping character, right, or on League Star, right, like the Runegraph to the Warp, maybe getting some Fortify or some block, things like that, other recovery methods, regeneration. These are just things to think about on your character, right? And so if you can get access to these, your mapping should feel quite a bit better, and your bossing as well. You can generally scale quite a bit of damage in the game at the moment, and so getting tank often can feel a little bit more comfortable to play, and that's at least what I prefer. Keep in mind on this budget as well, if you want to pump more damage, like if you're just going for a more damaging build, you could create some monstrosity that would just be one-tapping Ubers and such, and you wouldn't even need to worry about the tank. But again, I went for the tank setup just because it's something I wanted to invest into and kind of go to the other side from my Trickster last league, where that was tanky, but a lot more focused on the damage. This time around, we are pure tanking everything we need to. So that's where we are overall at. Now, we get to see what's truly cooking in the oven, this Uber Shaper. So we've been kind of chilling here, just kind of letting this guy cook. Got a lot of degens on the ground, that's pretty awesome sauce, but we're gonna go ahead and finish him off here to end off this video. But yeah, overall, this was a blast making it, and making the character and such, and also explaining it. As always, any questions down in the comments, I have no problem answering. And usually my Discord is open as well for questions. I'll do the best I can to respond to any questions, comments, concerns there and such. I've had lots of people reach out and such over the years, which is really cool. I've enjoyed seeing what people are working on, what they're farming towards. If they're playing something that I play and they're like, hey, we're working towards it, that's awesome to see too, because that's the great thing about PoE, right? We're here to have fun and learn, and this is what it's about. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We're gonna go and kill them off. No Sublime Vision, of course. Wouldn't that be awesome, right? Wouldn't that sell the build? No, but yeah, that's overall the build, and hopefully everyone enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time for some more content. Peace.